Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's economics class. Today we shall be looking at the topic theory of utility. Theory of utility. When we talk about theory of utility, what are we talking about? Every rational spender wants to derive satisfaction from consumption of any commodity. And that is why before you spend your money on any commodity or any good or service, you must know that that commodity is going to give you satisfaction. So when you talk about utility simply refers to satisfaction you derive from the consumption of a particular commodity. Satisfaction you derive when you consume a particular commodity at any particular given time. If you spend your money in buying bread, do you derive satisfaction from eating that bread? If you derive satisfaction, that is utility. Now, what are the various types of utility? There are basically three types of utility. We have form utility, we have time utility, and place utility. For instance, the loaf of bread I just talked about, you derive satisfaction from the loaf of bread consumed because it has been changed, it has been transformed from raw materials, flour, and also all others to a loaf of bread. So that gives you form utility. That is satisfaction you derive from the form of a particular product when it has been changed from raw material to a finished good. While time utility has to do with the satisfaction you derive when the good or the commodity you need is available at the right time you need it, at the exact time when you need it. Place utility on the other hand deals with making sure that you are able to procure the goods and services you need at a particular place that very close to you or nearby. That is, you just walk out of your room, out of your house to a nearby store, and you're able to procure the goods or the commodity you want. It will give you what we call place utility. Having talked about that, there are three concepts we are going to look at here today: concept of total utility, concept of marginal utility, and average utility. From the very first one, total utility, I said it is total satisfaction you derive from the consumption of a particular commodity. Total satisfaction. And when you talk about total satisfaction here, one thing you must know that is that in economics, satisfaction is measured in utils. UTILS. Satisfaction is measured in utils. So although we have diverse approach like cardinal approach, ordinal approach to measuring satisfaction. However, for this lesson, we shall be looking at the various concepts of these utilities. So total utility says total satisfaction we derive from the consumption of a particular commodity. If when you consume the first, let's say for instance, somebody that is really thirsty coming from a very scorching sun, and you get to a shop where they sell cold water, and you demand for a bottle of cold water. When you first consume the first bottle of cold water, you are going to derive a great satisfaction. When you derive, probably let's say it is measured in utils now, and you derive 10 utils for the first bottle of water you consumed, then the second bottle of water you consumed, of course, you are going to derive less satisfaction than the very first one. Let's say now 8 utils. Then the third bottle, let's say 6 utils now. Now, if you had the three satisfaction utils together, it will give you the total satisfaction. That is, the very first bottle gives you 10 utils, the second bottle gives you 8 utils, the third one gives you 6 utils. So adding the three of them together, 10 plus 8 plus 6, that will give you 24. So that will be your total satisfaction. And that's why you see that formula that says TU, that is total utility, equals utility 1 plus utility 2 plus utility 3 until you get utility, that is the last consumption. So say total utility from any unit of a given commodity, and U1, U2, U3 has to do with utility you derive from the consumption of a particular commodity, and the number of units consumed stands for N. Now the second one is marginal utility. When you talk about marginal utility, it has to do with additional satisfaction derived from the consumption of extra units of a particular commodity. Now, in the example I just gave you, somebody that took a bottle of water, initially derived 10 UTs. That is, the first bottle of water gave him 10 UTs, that is satisfaction. Now, when he consumed the second bottle, he had 8 UTs. When he consumed the third bottle, he had 6 units. What is the marginal utility between the second bottle and the very first bottle? The marginal utility between the second bottle and the first bottle will be total utility derived when first bottle is consumed minus utility derived when the second minus total utility derived when the two bottles are consumed minus the utility derived when the second bottle is consumed. That is total change in total change in total utility of the bottles minus that of the second bottle. By the time we get to the example, you see more of these and you have the better understanding over the total change in consumption. Now the third one is average utility. Average utility, this one is like you are trying to calculate mean. It is calculated by adding all the total utility together, or the total satisfaction derived, and you divide it by the number of units of commodity that is consumed. That is why you have AU, that is average utility, to be equal total utility divided by quantity consumed of a particular commodity. Let's quickly look at this illustration. Illustration says quantity of goods consumed, that is 1 to 5. Total utility, you have 8, A, B, 22, C. Average utility, D7, 6, E, 5. Marginal utility, of course, you know that at marginal utility, at every first output, it is always 0. That is nothing else. There is no marginal utility. Then you have F, 4, 4, G. Now, from the table above, compute the missing figures. What are the missing figures? A, B, C, D, E, F, and then G. Then construct a graph for total utility, average utility, and the marginal utility. Now, let's take them one after the other. Solution. To calculate total utility, don't forget that we said that the formula for calculating total utility is T1 U1 plus U2 plus U3 and so on like that. But in this case, you see we cannot use this formula. So we are going to use the inverted formula. What do I mean by that? Since average utility equals total utility divided by quantity consumed, then at output level A, average utility will be multiplied by quantity consumed. Average utility will be multiplied by quantity consumed. So if you look at output level A, the average utility is 7 and the quantity consumed is 2. So when you multiply the two together, it will definitely give you back the total utility, and that is why we have 7 multiplied by 2 to give us 14. If you follow the step like that, you'll be able to calculate for value of B and value of C. Now going to average utility. Average utility, you follow the simple formula that says total utility divided by the quantity consumed. So at output level D, if you look at the table again, the total utility is what? Is 8. And what is the quantity consumed at that level? Just 1. So that will be 8 divided by 1 to give you 8. If you follow the same step again, for this formula, you'll be able to calculate for the value of E. Then the third one is marginal utility. Marginal utility, which is change in total utility over change in consumption. Change in total utility over change in consumption. Now let's calculate for the value of F. What is the total utility at that F? The total utility there is what? The one we calculated for A the other time, that is 14. So you are going to have it to be T2 minus total utility 2 minus total utility 1. That is 14 minus 8 over quantity of goods consumed at output level 2 minus quantity of goods consumed at output level 1. That is 14 minus 8 over 2 minus 1. And that will give you what? 6. So if you follow that steps, you should be able to calculate for the value of G likewise. After you have calculated for other ones like B, C, E, and F, and G, and you now plot the graph, your graph should look like this one, something like this one. Now, you have your total units of commodity consumed on the x-axis and the satisfaction derived, total satisfaction, that is total utility, marginal utility, and average utility on the y-axis. So the blue line represents what? Total utility, that is when one unit of the commodity was consumed, you can see you derived 8 UTs. When the second one was consumed, third one, fourth one. So you see that, you know that you'll be adding, the satisfaction will be added together. That's why you see the total utility curve going upward. When it comes to average utility, you say it is divided. Total utility is divided by the number of commodity of units consumed. That is why total utility is not being divided by units of commodities consumed at each level, and that one is the red curve you see there. While the third one is the marginal utility. Third one is the marginal utility. Now, there's one thing I want to call your attention to here, and I want you to take note of it. As total utility begins to increase, marginal utility begins to fall. As total utility begins to increase, marginal utility begins to fall. Now, at the point where total utility reaches the maximum, you notice that marginal utility will be at 0. At the point where total utility reaches the maximum, the marginal utility will be at 0. And immediately total utility begins to fall. When the total utility curve begins to fall, the marginal utility will be tending towards negative. That is, like -1, -2, like that. So that is what we call relationship between total utility curve and marginal utility curve. Having talked about that, I want you to go home and settle down and provide solution to these questions. Define utility, explain in details with the help of diagrams total utility, that is to draw a diagram showing the total utility curve with explanation, that of marginal utility and average utility. Then the second question says, briefly describe the relationship between total utility and marginal utility. Describe the relationship between total utility and marginal utility. Till next time when we shall be meeting again, I'm still your regular host, David-Emmanuel-Victor. Goodbye.